business world, it's dog eat dog, and you need every bit of competitive edge you can possibly get. Whether you're a salesperson, an entrepreneur, a small business owner, or corporate executive, you've landed on the podcast that gives you that edge and more. This is the Business Coach Unplugged Podcast. Exploring the strategies, tactics, and mindset shifts needed to elevate your business and leadership skills to new heights. Your host has walked the walk. He's coached thousands of clients to remarkable results and rubbed shoulders with legends like Tony Robbins, Ken Blanchard, Jack Canfield, and Brian Tracy. It's practical advice, inspiring stories, and the occasional dose of tough love, helping you to overcome challenges and seize opportunities. This is the Business Coach Unplugged Podcast. And now your host, owner of Potential in Motion, coaching you to the edge of what's possible, Tom Kelly.
Welcome to the Business Coach Unplugged Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Kelly. Welcome to the first episode. This has been a long time coming, and I'm excited to get started. And to give you a little context, I'd like to start off by telling you a little bit about myself and what this podcast is about. I've been a business coach now for 22 years. I started a company called Potential in Motion in 2002, really for two reasons. Number one, I've always wanted to start a business, and I had a kind of very entrepreneurial thought process as I was growing up. And the other reason was really out of necessity. You see, in late 2001, early 2002, I lost my job. I was working as a director of business development for a tech company at the time. And back then, if you recall, we had September 11th and the dot-com bubble burst at about the same time. And my company I was working for went from 12,000 employees to 3,000 employees in about 6 months. And the team I worked on, 52-person sales team selling cable and DSL modems, went from 52 people down to 8 people. Then we went from 8 people down to 3 people. And you really don't need a director of business development if you only have 2 salespeople. So I was let go in the beginning of 2002. And then I started to really consider what I wanted to do going forward with the rest of my life. There was really no jobs in the tech space at the time. I was getting offers for about a third of what I was making. So that really was an option for me. So I decided I wanted to pivot and start my own business. And after about 6 months of really kind of some soul searching, doing some research and things like that, I decided to start a coaching business. And the reason I decided that was really I figured out that business consulting was going to grow by about 40% in the next decade. And as I dug into that a little bit, I stumbled upon this little niche called business coaching. And I felt that it was really a good fit, for me and my background. Having spent 10 years in sales and marketing, I really thought I could help small business owners, salespeople, and entrepreneurs get started with their businesses. So I signed up for some coach training and started coaching some people right out of the gate pro bono. And right away, I started having success with it. A lot of the clients that I was working with at the time were giving me great feedback. In fact, one of the clients I started with right out of the gate that I was coaching pro bono, 3 sessions in, quit his job. And he called me and said, "Hey, guess what I did?" He's like, "I quit my job." And I was freaking out because I was like, wow, what do you mean? I don't even know what I'm doing yet. And he was telling me that I was going to help him start a business. And as it turns out, I helped him start a graphic design business, which he made very successful. And I was off and running. So I started the business in June of 2002. And my goal was to replace my income within a year. And I told myself and I told my wife that I would do this for a year. And if I was able to recreate that income, I would continue to keep going in the coaching business. And if I wasn't, I would go out and get a real job. And I did have some trials and tribulations, getting the business off the ground, which I'll explain a little bit later. But I was able to be successful, and I hit my goal actually the day before it was due. And so that started my 22-year career as a business coach. As I grew the business through the years, I kind of got the itch to get back into the corporate world. And in 2007, I started to embark on that journey of going after large Fortune 500 companies as clients. And as I was doing that, oddly enough, I ran into a salesperson for the Ken Blanchard company at a networking event. And as I was talking to this person, I was like, "Oh, Ken Blanchard, the 1-minute manager guy." I'm like, "He wrote a bunch of books, right?" And he's like, yeah, we do leadership things and stuff like that. And I said, "Well, what do you do there?" And he says, "Well, we sell coaching and training into the Fortune 500 space." And we had an interesting conversation. Long story short, he connected me with their coaching division, and I talked to some people there. And after a couple conversations, they extended me an offer to be a subcontractor for them as an executive coach. So I've been working with Ken Blanchard since 2007. And once that happened, it sort of whet my appetite for that. I started scratching my head and said to myself, well, hey, if Ken Blanchard has coaches, I bet you people like Brian Tracy and Tony Robbins and Jack Canfield and those people have coaches as well. So I started doing some research, and I was a big Brian Tracy fan. Growing up in sales, learning sales from one of the masters himself, I started looking around there, and I went up on his website, and I noticed that he was selling his products through Nightingale Conant, which happens to be located here in Chicago where I live. So I picked up the phone one day and dialed the 800 number and asked them, "Hey, do you have any coaches over there?" And they said, "Well, yeah, we have a director of coaching here." And so I said, "Great, put him on the phone." And I spoke with him and I said, "Hey, I literally live a couple miles from your office. I'd love to take you to lunch." And so we set up a lunch for that Friday, and I met with them. And after that lunch, they hired me as a sales coach. So I've also been working with Brian Tracy as a sales coach. And then in 2012, as I continued to grow my practice, I sort of stumbled upon an opportunity to work for Tony Robbins. I had met someone that worked for him as a coach, and I just jokingly said, "Hey, how do I get that gig?" And she said, "Well, hey, it's pretty hard. You have to be referred in, and you have to go through an extensive interview process." And she's like, "But if you're interested, I'll give you a call next time that we're doing that." And so about 6 months later, she called me and she said, "Hey, give me your resume. I'll throw your hat in the name or throw your name in the hat." And so I did. And I got a call shortly later from the director of coaching over there. Mark is his name. And Mark said to me, he goes, "Hey, look, I think you're really overqualified for what we're looking for here. However, you have a ton of business coaching experience, and we really want to get into the business coaching space." And so I was hired there to really help them kind of spearhead that effort and get into the business coaching space. So I worked for Tony Robbins for 3.5 years, and I learned a ton from him from 2012 to about middle of 2015. And then in 2018, through Brian Tracy, I actually had the pleasure of meeting Jack Canfield, and Jack Canfield hired me to be a business coach for him as well. So I've worked for some of the biggest names in the coaching industry, and it wasn't my intention to do so, but just through networking and connecting the dots over the years, I've been able to do that. And the main driver for that was not to add more business, although that's a byproduct of that, but just to learn from the pioneers in the industry. And I certainly have done that, and I've been able to bring those lessons back to my clients throughout the year. In addition to that, I'm also a motivational speaker and a leadership trainer. In fact, one of my passions is speaking, and I've used that throughout the years as a way to grow my business. In fact, I really feel for any business owner, it's probably the best way to grow your business. And I've also, through being exposed to coaching for Ken Blanchard, I got a lot of exposure to their, top-notch leadership training. And I've also, been a channel partner for them for about 5 or 6 years now, where I bring those training programs into small and medium businesses, anywhere from, 10 employees up to 2,500 employees. So I also do that as well. So who is this podcast for, really? So, my focus over the last 22 years has been coaching salespeople, entrepreneurs, business owners, as well as corporate managers and executives. And that's really who this podcast is for. In addition to that, it's really for anyone that wants to improve their sales, communication, and leadership skills. So, if you fall into one of those buckets, you're probably going to get a lot of value, hopefully, out of the podcast here. So why should you listen to the podcast? I always tell my clients that I learn more from them than I teach them, and I've literally coached thousands of people over the last 22 years, and I've learned a ton about business and leadership and sales, influencing skills, and those are all the things that I'll be sharing in the podcast. And really, the goal of the podcast is the same as the goal of my business. I always tell my clients that there's 3 things I'll do for you as a coach. Number one, most people come to coaching with some kind of problem or issue they want to solve. So I'll certainly help you solve your problems. Number 2, my second goal is to help you create some problems. And what I mean by that is you solve your problems and start to evolve as a leader, whether you're leading a small business or a large Fortune 500 company. That's going to open up more opportunities and more doors for you and more challenges that you're going to have to overcome. And that's really what coaching is about, is helping people develop their skill set and go to the next level. So I'll certainly help you do that. And my real hope here, though, is the third thing, and that I always tell my clients is really what I'm here to do is help you reach your potential. not only as a business owner and a business leader, but as a human being. So through the podcast, if I can share what I've learned over the last 22 years with my audience and help them reach their potential as leaders and as human beings, then I've been successful. I also feel really right now that we're in a place in our world, in our country really, where we have a crisis of leadership. And so if I can share some of my knowledge and inspire people to become better leaders and run better businesses, then this will impact and have a ripple effect on our world. So if I can do that, then this has really been successful. And my father once told me that smart people learn from their own mistakes, but wise people learn from the mistakes of others. So if you're looking for a place to take your business to the next level and to fast forward your growth as a leader, then you're probably going to find a home here. So now that you know a little bit more about me and why I started this podcast, let's jump in. One of the key things that I've learned over the last 22 years is that running a business isn't easy. In fact, I always tell my clients that running a business isn't easy. If it was, everyone would do it. And while that may seem obvious to many of you, especially if you're already running a business or if you work in the corporate world, to most people it's not. I think for most people, they see, they look at things from afar and it looks like, people make it easy or they have that overnight success. And really, that's not the case. And I can certainly relate to this when I first started my business. I came from a sales background. It was pretty easy for me to go out and sell and build my business. And that's one of the challenges I think many of my clients have is just being able to grow their business and understand sales and marketing and how to get to the next level. But I was really good at that out of the gate, and I was able to start to land some clients pretty quickly. But I realized about 6 months in how hard it was. I remember looking back, at my financial situation in 2002, and I had made a whopping $3,000 in the entirety of 2002. And you can imagine what that feels like coming from, a successful job, running a 52-person sales team, working in corporate America, especially in the tech field. I was pretty well paid. So I was starting to get a little bit depressed at that time and started to doubt myself, which I think a lot of people do when they run a business. And I remember just joking with my wife one day. I said, "Hey, I figured out how to 10x my business." And she got all excited and she's like, "Really? How's that?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to get a job at Starbucks and I'll even get some health care with that as well." So I was kind of laughing about it because I'm like, "Hey, I could go get a job as a barista and make 30 grand a year and have a much easier time of it than I was now." So I realized right out of the gate that for me, it was a challenge to start a business and to get it successful. And luckily for me, though, through some encouragement from my wife, I kept moving forward and I ended up hitting my goal the night before it was due. I actually, in 2003, I started with those 3 clients, and by April of that year, it ramped up to 30 clients. And by the time I hit the end of June, I had hit my goal. I had been able to replicate my income, and so therefore I kept going in the business, and I'm still here today, 22 years later. That's not the case for everyone, though. I mean, a lot of businesses go out of business, and if you look at the statistics, it's not easy running a business. It's not easy being successful. And no time was harder than I think than COVID. And all the time I've been coaching, during that time, it was probably the toughest for everyone in business. I think just in our society in general, no matter whether you're running a business or if you were an employee of a business, we had some really hard times for a couple of years there. In fact, I remember back in the beginning of 2020, the economy was doing really well, and most of my clients were booming. Their businesses were growing. They were having a lot of success. And then all of a sudden, at the end of February, beginning of March, all these countries started to shut down, and a lot of businesses not only were shut down, but they weren't allowed to leave their homes. And I remember one of my clients at the time, a gentleman in Australia, he had called me for a session that week, and he was kind of in an alarmed state. He said, "Look, Tom, Australia shut us down. I can't leave the house. I'm a personal trainer. I train people in the gym. I also train people in their homes. And I'm not able to leave my house, so I can't train anyone. So right now I'm out of business." It's like I have no idea how long my business is going to be shut down and what to do about it. And I have no way to feed my family right now. And there was a lot of my clients in that situation. And one of the things that I pride myself on as a coach is helping people solve their problems. And it was certainly a tough, challenging time right then. But I knew at that time, probably the biggest thing that you can do as a business owner and a leader, if you want to be successful, is have the right mindset. And the best way to get the right mindset, or one way to get the right mindset, is to ask great questions. So I started asking my clients, and I asked this particular person the question, "What's the opportunity?" And it was really interesting the reactions I got, because people really got angry at me for asking that question. Because here we are in a situation where, due to no fault of their own, their business was shut down. They weren't able to make money. They weren't able to leave the home and their house. And here I am trying to be positive and ask them, hey, what's the opportunity? And so some people started swearing at me and getting angry with me. And once I calmed them down and helped them shift their mindset a little bit, I really showed them, I said, look, a lot of businesses, in fact, most successful businesses were started in very, very trying times. Some of the most successful businesses in the world actually were started during times like the Great Depression, when everyone thought that, there was no opportunity, there was massive opportunity. So I started asking that question, what's the opportunity? And what was interesting is, in this particular case, I asked my client, I said, well, hey, has the demand for your product changed? And he says, well, what do you mean? I said, well, do people still want to get personal training? Do they want to stay in shape? And he's like, well, absolutely. And I said, well, is that more so today than it was yesterday or less? He said, well, actually, it's more. People are terrified of getting COVID. They want to stay in shape. They want to get healthy. So I said, so if I'm understanding you, there's more demand for your product today than yesterday. He said, yeah, I think so. Absolutely. And I said, so really all we need to do is figure out, how do we meet that demand without you leaving your house? And I said, so again, what's the opportunity? And he said, well, gee, if I could figure out a way to train these people without leaving my house, then I could continue with my business. And so the obvious thing that came out, we were on a Zoom call at the time. So I said, how about you train them over Zoom? He said, wow, that's a great idea. So I said, great, here's your homework assignment. For next week, what I want you to do is I want you to call all your clients and tell them that you would love to coach them over Zoom if they're open to it, and see where that goes. So he said, great. So we hung up the phone, got off the Zoom call, and the next morning he called me back. And he said, hey, Tom, I got some great news. He said, not only did I call my clients, but all of them are on board. They all want to continue working with me. And actually, all their spouses and some of their kids and neighbors want to do it as well. So he actually doubled his business in 24 hours just by asking that question, what's the opportunity? And what's interesting is that as he, continued to grow his business through that COVID time when he was locked down, he actually kept asking himself that question. And he started to build this business in ways he never thought possible. He put up a website. He started recording pre-recorded workout routines. He started some group coaching things. He also, as a result of the increase in his income, bought a new house. And next to the house is a big barn that he converted into a personal training center and workout facility. And then when COVID was done, he had people come to him. And he also had a website where he launched training, where people could, buy training in packages if they just wanted to watch their recordings, or if they wanted live training, they could do that with him live as well. And he 4 or 5x'd his business in about 6 months. So when times are hard, there's great opportunities. And really the lesson here is this, is number one, the chokehold in any business is the mindset and the skill set of the leader of that business. So if your business isn't going where you want it to go, you have to look inward. You have to really look at yourself and say, hey, do I have the right mindset right now to go to the next level? And do I have the right skill set, or do I need to work on developing myself so my business can go to the next level? Your business and your leadership will be a direct reflection of where you're at with those things. Number two, great leaders ask great questions. And great questions really direct the focus of your mind. And as I said earlier, one of the great ways to direct your mindset and to have a great mindset is to ask great empowering questions. So as a business leader, the key to your success is really being resourceful. And the best way to be resourceful is by having a superior mindset. And one way that you can create a superior mindset is ask yourself great questions. And one of the things I learned from Tony Robbins when working for him was that any result you create in life and business comes down to two things. 80% is mindset. The other 20% is your strategy, or the how-to piece. And what I find interesting as a business and executive coach is that most people come to me for the strategy piece. They want to know the how-to piece. How do I do this? How do I become a better leader? How do I grow my business? How do I start a business? But the reality is that's the easy part. There's all sorts of how-to books and resources and mentors and things that can teach you the strategy or the how-to part. The key is the mindset. What is your psychology? What is your mindset? And we'll talk a lot about mindset as we move forward. But I want to give you today a resource that can help you with that. One of the best resources that I use with my clients, it's one of my favorite books actually, is a book called Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. And it's by an author, Mary Adams. And this book actually was shared with me quite a while ago. It was probably a good decade ago. And someone shared this with me and they said, hey, you would love this book. It's a great story. It's actually a story about an executive who's working in the Fortune 500 space. And he is reporting to the CEO of a company. And he's failing miserably as a leader. In fact, his team is producing the worst results in the company. So he goes to the CEO and he resigns his position. He says, hey, I want to resign. I'm not doing well here. My team isn't performing and I want to resign. And the CEO says, look, I'm not going to accept your resignation. What I'd like you to do instead is work with my coach for 6 months. And at the end of that time, if you want to quit your job, I will, take a resignation then. So the CEO convinces him to work with this coach. And the coach teaches him this process called question thinking. And through this process, he implements this with his team. And long story short, he turns things around and completely goes from the worst in the company to number one in the company in over a 6-month period. And it's kind of a great story, and there's some great tools in this book. But what was interesting is after I read this, I was a little bit skeptical. And I said, hey, I wonder if this would really work. So one of the things I did, I was coaching someone in the Fortune 500 space at the time, a large big box retailer. And the person I was working with actually had just taken over a new district. There was 10 stores in the district, and the district had 4 different district managers in the last decade. And the best they'd ever done in that time was 53rd out of 104 or so districts. And so when this guy took over the district, he was working with me as his coach. He hired me to coach him. And one of the things that I said, hey, you should check out this book. So he read the book, and he ended up giving it to his 10 store leaders. And in 6 months, they went from number 53 in the company to number 2 in the company. And at that point, at the end of our process together, I said, what was the biggest thing that we did together that helped you get there? And he said it was that book. And so I've been recommending this book ever since. In fact, over the years, one of the people I recommended the book to actually said to me, hey, I bet Mary Adams would love to hear about all the success you've had with the book here. And I said, yeah, I bet she would. And he goes, well, hey, I happen to know her. She's a friend of mine. And so I actually got an introduction to the author, and she's been a friend of mine for quite a long time now. So highly recommend the book. It's great to get started with if you want to change your mindset and understand how to ask better questions to change your mindset. It's a great resource. And I'm sure we'll talk more in depth about mindset in some of the following episodes. But in the meantime, you can access a number of free resources that will help you improve your business as well as your leadership on my website at www.businesscoachchicago.com. Also, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with you and chat with you there. And thank you for listening. I hope this first podcast episode was great here. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please click the subscribe button, leave a review, and of course, invite your friends to listen in as well. I'm Tom Kelly, and until next time, enjoy your week.
You've been listening to the Business Coach Unplugged Podcast. On this highly useful podcast for people in the business world, you get the absolute top-notch info from an absolute pro on how to elevate your business and your leadership skills. Tom Kelly owns Potential in Motion, coaching you to the edge of what's possible. He's also a professional speaker and leadership trainer. He's worked with some of the biggest names in the coaching business: Tony Robbins, Ken Blanchard, Jack Canfield, Brian Tracy. To sign up for a complimentary coaching session and to access some great free resources, hit the website at businesscoachchicago.com. Your success is not just a possibility, it's a certainty. See you next time on the Business Coach Unplugged Podcast.